Good afternoon. For those of you who are joining us from the East Coast, welcome to the first of our Social and Emotional Learning, or SIPSL Spring webinar series. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. She is a colleague of ours at the Center for Schools and Communities. Nichole Fisher has served in the field of education for over 17 years, half of which she spent as an English teacher in the classroom with students in grades 9 through 12 in Pennsylvania and Tennessee. Nichole is the Youth Development Program Coordinator for Pennsylvania's statewide Education Leading to Career and Employment Training, or ELECT, an initiative at the Center for Schools and Community. Nichole provides ongoing training and technical assistance to ELECT grantees who serve pregnant and parenting teens across Pennsylvania. Thank you, and help me in welcoming Nichole. Welcome, Nichole.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate it. And I'm so excited to be here with you all. I just checked in and it looks like you are able to see my PowerPoint. We were having a little trouble with the slideshow, so I just wanted to make sure you were seeing that. Yes, I am excited to be kicking off this series for the spring. And so yes, without further ado, I will get started. And like Stephanie said, I am a youth development coordinator with the Center for Schools and Communities. And this is an opportunity that I definitely was not going to miss out on. So thank you for having me. I just want to get started with a few community agreements. Hopefully I can get my slides to go there. Yes, here we are. Okay, so just a couple of things. As you all know, when we get started with any of these trainings and when you're working with your own youth that you serve and support, you always want to start off with some things just so everybody can come and get on the same page with how we want to share, what we want to be thinking of, and kind of get ourselves in the right mindset. And so first and foremost, being curious, open, and respectful, and remember that no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. So let's just remember that. I'm open to hearing your thoughts, your questions, your comments. So please feel free to share in the chat anytime you have something you'd like to share. Give the benefit of the doubt and ask questions. We can't be articulate all the time. Take care of ourselves, stretch, eat, drink, use the restroom, rest, etc. Don't speak for others without explicit permission, and don't share something communicated in private or in a safe space. One mic, one voice at a time. Speak from your own experience, of course. Use I statements rather than generalizations. And finally, but of course not encompassing all things, is practice cultural humility. This is something that I want to just touch on really quickly because a lot of people, when I mention that, haven't heard that before. And so I just want to just really quickly cover this, the difference between cultural competency and cultural humility. We've heard cultural competency quite a bit, I'm sure. And I just want to take a moment to recognize the fact that when we speak of competency, competency suggests mastery. And in my mind, and I know in a lot of different capacities these days, people are speaking of the fact that I don't know that it's possible, right, for any one of us to gain competency over anyone else's cultural experiences. And so humility, on the other hand, involves admitting that we don't know everything there is to know about another culture, but we are willing to learn. We're willing to address our inherent biases, and our embedded perceptions. And so this is a lifelong learning process. It involves self-reflection and self-critique. And so when working with youth or really working with our colleagues or any other people within our lives, we want to be thinking about this from a culturally humble perspective. And there are some ideas about what that looks like here on the slide for you to take a look at. It has to do with embracing the complexity of what diversity means, being open to individual differences, reserving judgment, of course, communicating in a way that's most understandable to others, and ongoing effort to become more familiar with the worldviews of other people. Collaboration is key. Demonstrating familiarity with youth and their families in their living environments. And that means a lot of different things in the work that we do, obviously. And of course, self-reflection and considering how our own biases may interfere with our ability to objectively listen. So I just wanted to point that out because in our community agreements, we talk a lot about becoming culturally competent, or we talk about that in our own work day to day. But I'd like to just kind of spin that a little bit and have you start thinking about it in terms of cultural humility. So if you have any questions about that or you want to look into that yourself, it's definitely a push I'm seeing out there now, and I love that term. So something I just wanted to bring up with you all. So let's just dive in here a little bit to this web analogy. So where did this topic, or where did the title of this session come from? I've always kind of been interested in relationships with youth. It's been something that I've been working toward and working with staff on, but also when I was working directly with youth, this concept of relationships and how we can communicate better, more effectively with our youth to try to figure them out, right? Figure out how they tick. But in reality, what we have to realize is that when working with anyone, but essentially with the youth that we serve, that relationships are key, right? We're learning this now every day, more and more. We're hearing more and more about how relationships are the root of development in youth, and how we can help to solve some of these problems that they're having, whether it be with academics or in their life in general. And so spider webs, right? Spider webs, this analogy has really been at the root of some of my planning for this session, but just in the work that I'm doing every day. Is there anyone who wants to unmute and read this quote for me? Maybe we don't want to start off by not having me do all the speaking. Anyone interested? Feel free to.
Spider webs
Yay, go
are,
for it.
yes, spider webs are marvels of nature, very strong and very flexible. By some estimates, they are 5 to 10 times stronger than a steel web of the same weight. They can stretch by 30 to 40% without breaking. Engineers who study them say the genius of spider webs lies in the combination of strength and flexibility.
Thank you
Not too
so
sure
much.
that our name is.
Yeah, that's okay. You don't have to read the name. I struggled with that myself. That's why I typed it out. um,
Uh,
Thank you so much
Continue.
for reading that out loud. I think what's so empowering, and when we read this, is the flexibility and the strength of a web, right? So if you think about this in terms of relationships and how a web of relationships can be kind of this metaphor for what we can provide to our students and to our youth, is that it doesn't have to be perfect, but it does need to be strong and flexible, right? And a web is really an analogy for what every young person needs to grow and thrive. So just as a spider depends on this web for sustenance, it's just like that for youth. They need it to shape and guide virtually every aspect of their lives. And this really applies to us as well. So it can be strong and flexible in order to adapt to the world around it, and it to the needs and strengths of the people in those relationships. And so throughout life, the people we rely on typically do shift and change. And along the way, other relationships complement the strengths and of all of those central relationships. And ultimately, this web grows stronger. But we can also see how when any particular part of that web gets weaker, right, that web can fall apart. So this is where this analogy, where this topic and this the theme for this today's session has come from. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background there. Thank you for that. So just a couple of things. I'm going to skim over this, but this is just some of the foundational research. Some of the background for this comes from the Youth Thrive Protective and Promotive Factors, some things from the Trauma Skilled Schools model from the National Dropout Prevention Center, as well as the Developmental Relationships Framework, which is the bulk of the research that I've done and worked on to create this session today. And it really is inspiring work that I want to share with you. And therefore, you'll notice that a lot of the resources and some of the tools that you'll see throughout this session come from the Search Institute. And so I'll skim over this, but you will see more of this as we go along. Okay, so just real quick, I want to take a second and have you do a little bit of reflection on some of your own relationships and some things that you've experienced in your own life. So I want to encourage you, first and foremost here, to think of a relationship that you had as a student. Some of us aren't thinking too far back, and some of us are thinking quite a ways back. I had this epiphany as I heard a person I'm working with in my daily life mention that she was born in 1994, and it struck me that she's going to be 30, which means I have now been out of high school for 30 years. So again, I haven't been a student in a while, but think of a positive relationship you had as a student. And I put a minute, but I don't think we all need a real long minute. And either write it down or just kind of ponder for a second about this relationship, how this relationship affected you. And you can put it in the chat. You can just write it down for yourself or just think on it for a moment. I'm going to give you maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds or so to just sort of ponder this. You can put something in the chat, just jot it down, or just think. Okay, and as you're kind of maybe wrapping up or maybe even still thinking about this or writing something down, I want you to next kind of transition into thinking about a positive relationship you have had or do have with a student or a youth that you serve or support. And same thing. Take a minute, just write down how you believe this relationship affects or has affected the student. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so to do that. Okay, so as you're thinking on this, writing it down, pondering, I want to say thank you to Matthew. I appreciate that because you're kind of anticipating where I'm going with this. I was going to ask this question. So number one, obviously, I think we could individually take both questions and ask what made them meaningful, but thinking about the two questions, what were some similarities? What made those relationships meaningful? And Matthew answered the question for me. How about some others? You can put these answers in the chat. If you'd like to unmute even, I think we have a manageable group here. What were some things that made what made these relationships positive? Good, thanks, Shannon. Authenticity, right? Authenticity of the interactions. Positive human connection is what Matthew said. I appreciate that. Other things? Connection, feeling seen or heard. Yeah. So we see words like authenticity, we see connection, we see seen or heard or genuine. How about some tangible, like some very specific things? Can anybody give me some ideas of some specific things that were done, actions that maybe you experienced from a positive relationship or that you've provided? Thank you. Safe space, right? Empathy. Oh, good. Increased learning outcomes. I like that. We always like those academic outcomes, right? Good. Okay. Great. Keep thinking about this. It'll continue throughout the session, but I just wanted to hear some things. I love that interest in their lives, remembering things that they valued, remembering what they say, not just hearing what they say, but remembering what they say, right? And applying that and bringing it up again later. Them knowing that you heard them is a huge piece of this puzzle. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Thank you. Yes, praise, proud of them. Yeah. Thanks so much. Okay, so I appreciate your interaction there. Thank you for doing that. We're going to move forward here. I just want to take a second. So let's unpack a little bit about what the developmental relationships framework is. And so again, I mentioned this comes out of the Search Institute. And it really grew out of focus groups that were done with youth parents, educators, youth workers, and others. And this came from a wide-ranging review of existing research. So it's not like they reinvented some wheels, right? It was an extensive analysis of existing data and, of course, some input from scholars and practitioners. And it builds on a lot of work, right? So if you've ever heard of developmental assets, I suggest looking it up. I can provide some more, but it didn't fit in a 60-minute presentation. We can go into that a little bit more later, but it's done by Peter Benson, who created the asset framework. And a developmental relationship really involves a dynamic mix of 5 elements, which we'll get into a little bit later. But the question is, what makes a relationship developmental? And the answer is that it has to do with when these relationships help people discover who they are. They help people gain skills necessary to shape their lives. And ultimately, it helps them to learn how to engage with and contribute to the world around them. So a relationship is considered developmental when it does kind of all of these things. Okay. And so the question could be too, and I think most of us in the realm that we work in could answer this pretty easily, but why do these things matter? And here are the answers, right? And that is, young people who experience these relationships are more likely to report a wide range of social emotional strengths and other indicators of well-being. And so they're going to thrive when they have relationships in their lives that are developmental by definition. Young people with strong relationships are more resilient when they do face stress and trauma throughout their lives. And young people do better when they experience a strong web of relationships with many people. And I say many, but I will move into this a little bit later. That doesn't mean that all of these relationships are core relationships or they're all strong relationships. But the idea is that this web is developed of a variety of different types of relationships. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well. Okay. So here is where we start to delve into the bulk of this, this concept of the developmental relationship. And so there are 5 key elements, and these elements are really the things that I want you to be thinking about as we move forward. And we're going to really dive in quickly into a breakout activity. These, I believe, and we'll talk more about some of how this is broken down in the breakout and then beyond the breakout. These are the 5 key elements of the developmental relationship framework. The 5 are express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. All 5 of these things, just by reading them, you could probably define what those mean to you, right? Or what they would look like in a sense. So without going into a lot of extra detail, we're going to go into a breakout activity where I'm going to have each of you meet up in a small group and talk through some of these things with a couple of specific questions. So I'm going to break down what that looks like here on the next slide. We're going to move you into breakouts, and I'm thinking we'll probably take, let me just double check my time here. I think we'd be okay to take probably, let's go somewhere in between, maybe 7 minutes. I think we'll do 7 minutes. And in the groups, you will be assigned by the element. So when you get into a group, your group will be assigned, maybe you'll be in express care, maybe you'll be in challenge growth. So based on the element that you're assigned, I want you to answer 2 questions with your group. Number 1, what are some ways that you can strengthen this thread? Meaning, express care, for example. How can you strengthen that thread of expressing care with or for the youth that you work with? And number 2, what are some things that you could be doing inadvertently without realizing it, or that you may be doing or may do to weaken that thread, or that some people might do to weaken that thread in the youth's web? Just kind of thinking on those 2 questions. We're going to report out when we come back, just hearing from each of those groups. And thank you. Hopefully everybody caught that. Elizabeth noticed that she has a group of folks that with her that they can converse with. So Michael, hopefully you caught that. So in those groups, we'll just go ahead and get started once we are set in our groups. This will be broadcast to each of the groups, to the questions, and we'll do about 7 minutes, and then we'll come back and check in on these. Does anyone have any questions? If so, you can put them in the chat. Okay, I look forward to having you come back and we'll talk through some of these things. There we go. Go ahead and jump in those groups and let me know if you have any problems. Okay. Looks like we have everybody back. Exciting. All right. You're still seeing my slides, correct? All right, cool. Nice. Okay. So, is anyone from the first group willing to, that would be our Express Care group, is anyone from the first group willing to share some ways that you can strengthen? Actually, you know what? Let's go with the weekend first. Let's go with the weekend. Any ways that we are maybe unknowingly weakening the threads of Express Care with the youth we work with? From
Sure,
our,
I can pop in and say a little bit about that.
thank you.
A lot of what we shared about strengthening, could also been applied to the second question about weakening as well, just by not doing something.
Right.
But some of the specifics we said about things that we could do that would inadvertently weaken it was, lack of follow through, not being 100% present when you're, working with the students, not giving them the presence that you were supposed to be giving to them and making them feel like they were not being seen or heard. So those were a couple of things that we threw out.
Thank you. Thank you. Really good points, because I think you're right. Like a lot of times it's that either or, right? Like you're either doing it or you're not doing it. If you're not doing it, it's a weakening. If you're doing it, it's a strengthening. So I appreciate you pointing that out. It's definitely a good point. Anybody else want to share for Express Care before we move forward? I appreciate that. I think challenge growth then, moving forward, challenging growth. Anyone from that group want to share out? Maybe in the chat if you don't want to open up a mic. What are some ways we can strengthen the thread of challenge growth, or weaken it for that matter? Who are my challenge growth people? Come on now. I was a teacher, so I'm gonna have to start calling on names. I wrote down everybody in that group. I know your names. I know I had Brittany and Christine and Lauren and Rebecca and Samantha. All right. Anybody else want to chime in though? How are some ways that we could strengthen the thread of challenge growth? Feel free to jump in if you don't know. Oh, we were unable to see the questions in your group. Okay. So, all right, we can skip over this, but if you have any ideas, put them in the chat. Realistic feedback. Thank you. Yep. And, okay, communication for sure. I'm curious, what's a way that we could weaken that thread? What are ways we could weaken the thread of challenging growth? That's a tricky one. Think about ways that we could keep them from growing. We don't have to answer that right now, but just put that kind of, yes, Steph.
I think one of them is when we're too cautious, when we're sort of afraid of maybe causing discomfort for them. There's a way to have conversations that will challenge their growth that don't have to be uncomfortable, or that are uncomfortable but have a positive outcome.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that for sure. Because anytime, when we are afraid, when we let our own fears, right, or our own, maybe our own discomfort create that lack of open communication and making them feel uncomfortable. We're getting a lot in the chat too. Absolutely, fixed versus growth mindset, because that's a big part of this. Putting them in a box, making assumptions, failing to focus on the future. Unrealistic goals is a big one. When we allow that and when we encourage it, we're setting them up for constant disappointment, right? Constant fear, and really fueling that fire for them to just sort of keep repeating this cycle of not meeting a goal, right? And I think that can be really challenging. Okay, let's move to the next one. Providing support. What are some ways that we can strengthen that thread or weaken it? Thoughts about that? Feel free to put it in the chat if you'd like. We had some confusion with some of the questions and groups and stuff, so.
Hello. Yeah, I think
Ah,
in our group we kind of like talk a lot about providing a safe space to the student or the youth, being active listening, also wrapping up that conversation with like possible support, like if they're in a school, do you want to talk to the school counselor, to the social worker, or even providing community resources.
yeah.
Um, and also for the weekending part, we kind of like say, like if the youth come to you, you kind of like say, oh, I don't have time for that. Or when they open up, you say, oh, don't worry, you will overcome that, or you'll get over it. So that kind of like weaken that relationship because you're not fully there for them, providing that support.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, anytime we say we'll do something, we won't do it. We don't follow through. Being there to support and listen is always huge. For sure. Thanks for sharing that. I'm noticing the time. I want to make sure that we've already spent a little too much time on this, but this is one of my favorite things to talk through and work through. So sharing power, kind of the same ideas, right? Feel free to put these in the chat. By the way, if you could, I think the groups that did share power and expand possibilities, if you could share some of those thoughts that you had in your groups in the chat, that would be helpful for the group as a whole. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. I think we want to get to some of this other stuff. So I would like to see it for the sake of the group. I think they would as well. Some of the ways you could strengthen and weaken those threads. Please keep sharing those things as we move forward. All of these have some of those similar characteristics where we do one thing, we're strengthening, we do the opposite, we're weakening. Thank you for doing that, Riddell. I appreciate that. Keep going with those things. I want to just point out, and this is a link, and actually, Steph, I might ask you to put this link in the chat at some point, maybe toward the end, or if you'd like to do it now and again later. We aren't going to actually go to this and share it now, but there is a place through the Search Institute, they actually share this. You can go in and do a little quiz that will show you some of the strengths and weaknesses in your own relationships with the students and the youth that you work with. And each of those, it gives you a score under each of those categories, and it will provide you with a resource for each that will give you ideas for how you can strengthen in each of those categories. It's a really great resource and a great tool for you to be utilizing. And you can even have your youth do this so that they can see how their strengths are in each of these categories with the people that they have in their own lives. But this relationship check tool is a really cool thing for self-reflection. So I will be Steph has the slides. We can share these resources out with you later as well, but I'm going to keep moving. I'm going to skip through some of these slides pretty quickly, but I just want to share some of these things like we mentioned before and things you talked about in your groups. Some ideas for expressing care. You mentioned these probably when you were talking about ways to strengthen these things. Expressing care, right? Learning their names, including their correct pronouns, listening actively, building trust, smiling and laughing, folks. That laughter is and truly is a medicine, right? It's a great medicine. Being their cheerleader and showing up, challenging growth. Again, these are all here for you, and you will be able to receive some of these things after this session. I'm not a fan of skipping through slides. I'm a fan of longer sessions. Longer sessions and more talk time. But I will skip through these. You'll notice a list of these things, and you'll get all of these resources to utilize later. But there are lots of ideas. I just want to make sure I point this out. Finding the balance between providing help and taking over. Has anybody experienced this with your kids? When you're working with youth, there's a fine line between providing assistance and doing it for them, right? If you're a parent or you work with youth, you know that this is a fine line. So keep in mind that when you're doing this, there is a trick because there's a trick to it because we don't want to end up in them quitting or end up in discouragement. We want to make sure that we're giving them this support in a way that's going to ultimately be an assist to them. Sharing power can be very uncomfortable, but it's very, very helpful to our kids. Expanding possibilities. Okay, I need to move forward. So what is contributing to a web of support for our kids? And this is kind of what a web of support is made up of when it comes to developmental relationship framework. And when we're talking about this web, and it's made up of actors, not like Hollywood actors, but these are the young people, the people that the young people interact with. And they're essentially just parents, teachers, bus drivers, coaches, mentors. It can be their peers, right? It's anybody that they interact with. There are strong ties and weak ties. So strong ties are these people that they have multiple types of support from, and they have long-lasting and enduring relationships with these people. Weak ties, on the other hand, are those who kind of they are bridging these different aspects of social capital, but they don't provide quite as much support, right? They're just like their acquaintances and people that they come into contact with and they might interact with here and there. Their relationships are also maybe less enduring. So it could be a teacher, but it's one they might just come into contact with 1 year and then they move on, right? So they're not quite as strong. Relationship cores, social support, and social capital. Relationship cores are these clusters of strong ties between people. So this might be, they might have different types of cores. So a home core, a school core, a community core, right? Where they each have these cores and clusters of relationships. And then obviously we know what social support, I think, would be, which is there's different types like emotional, informational, instrumental, which is practical type of stuff. And then these affirmations they can get within the community, like whether it's with their groups, they're in the band or they're in a certain sport, right? Different groups of, and of course, friendships would also fall in that category. And then social capital, which we're going to break down some of these things as we move forward. Something I want to mention to you really quickly as well is when we're talking about these webs of support, within each of these core relationship groups, there are anchors. So you've heard these terms like just one person, right? All it takes is one person, right? So we know that when working with youth and the youth we come across, our youth often will like magnetize toward this one person or this is one mentor who might a teacher, whether it's a teacher, a coach, a family member, one person that they really turn to. And that person is referred to as their anchor, the person they feel like they can go to for anything, the person they can navigate kind of all of these contexts and they bridge them into these other contexts in their lives. And it's this person that gives us unconditional support. And often what we see with a lot of these youth that are in these at-risk situations, they may be lacking that. They might be lacking that anchor in their lives. And in order, the Developmental Relationships Framework basically states that when youth are flourishing, typically it's because they're rooted in a web of relationships. And in those webs, there are at least 3 to 5 anchor relationships. And so that, if you think of it in terms of that, then we know why a lot of our youth might be struggling. These anchor relationships should be in these different locations, at home, at school, in other places they spend time. And so we want to look at it from that standpoint. And when we are working in our day-to-day functions with our youth, we want to think about who these anchor relationships are with. And if they don't have them, we want to help to encourage it. We want to help them build them and identify who those people are for them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there is a lot more information out there on this. Building social capital, the importance of this is huge. It really does drive well-being and expand opportunities for our youth. And this begins in elementary. I mean, this begins way early. Accessing tight-knit webs of support begins way early on, and then it kind of just grows from there. So their exposure to diverse range of people begins at an early age, or can if they have the right people kind of helping them to develop that. And then eventually as they move forward within their schooling and in their lives, maybe that's advisors, coaches, mentors, sponsors, and then moving forward into their professional networks and supports. The benefits are many, many, many when it comes to social capital. That's in well-being, grades, and engagement, moving into their sense of future and possible selves. And then, of course, post-secondary and success in their future lives, whether that be as they get into internships and jobs and whatever their educational choices may be. So I feel like I'm talking speedily as I notice what time it is, and I apologize for that. But as you're noticing these things, if you have questions that pop up, please feel free to ask. When you're measuring a student or a youth social capital, just think of it in terms of these four structures or these four things. The first is quantity of relationships, and knowing that the more relationships a student has, the better chances they are to find support, right? And again, strength of the relationships varies, but it's important to have the relationships in general. The quality of the relationships are obviously going to evolve and change as students' needs evolve, but the quality is something to think about and talk with your students about. The structure of the networks, and that has to do with how all these different people the student knows, how those people know each other and how they're connected, and how these structures serve different functions and the different channels those have for discovering new opportunities for those youth, right? So this web grows as the students' networks grow and their relationships grow. And so every person involved in a student's life has this ability to connect them to this new thread, right? Build a new thread or create a new thread. And then, of course, the ability to mobilize these relationships. So teaching your students, I mean, the students should be involved in this whole development of their web, right? So anybody who can be a part of that with the student is important, but teaching them the value of social capital and this mindset and skills that they need to activate their relationships will ultimately help them strengthen that web as they move forward in their lives. Okay. And as we as we try to strengthen our students' networks, we just want to be aware of some of these key things, which I just mentioned a little bit about. And that is getting to know who your students know. So I don't know, in this group, I'm curious to know how many of us have direct contact with youth on a daily basis. And if you're a mentor, a case manager, somebody who serves youth where you would be helping them with goal setting and helping them to develop a web of support. If you are, can you just tell me in the chat, do you have, how many of you with a yes, just do you have direct contact with youth on a daily basis? It's a lot of yeses. That's good. Yay. You are my people. Yay. Nice. Good. So you have the capacity to sit down with a group of students and really help them map out a web of who supports them, who they could find for additional support. And again, I think we find on a pretty frequent basis that students, if you ask them who their support people are, they're going to struggle. They aren't going to know who to put down in some cases. But that's where we come in, right? That's where we come in to start helping them to bridge and kind of create those maps. And I want to move forward because I want to share some of these things. So including youth in identifying, building, and maintaining their own webs is crucial. Involving all adults who are involved with them. And that means their teachers, their counselors, their student support services staff, their whether it be their case managers, people inside and outside of a school building, and of course, fostering collaboration among those folks who are actors in that web, leveraging those anchors that are in their lives, if they have any, and if they don't, I would argue that probably they might, but they don't even recognize that. And so sometimes it's about defining those terms for them and asking different questions. Instead of asking questions like, how can I help you? Ask them how you can work with them in a way that is aligned with their own strengths, needs, and goals. And so I think it's important that we reframe questions, right? So reframing questions from saying, how can I help you? Because chances are you're going to get the, oh, I don't know, right? The shrug of the shoulders, no idea, don't know what I want to do. It's the same as if you ask them what their goals are. You're not going to get answers, right? But I think if you start to reframe questions about looking at strengths, needs, and goals in a way that is like, how can I work with you rather than how can I help you? I think it'll go a lot longer way toward that. All right. Some of you, we know what a relationship map probably looks like. You've probably seen some of these things in the past, but just a couple of key things to think about. The best way to visualize a youth web of support is through relationship mapping. If you've never sat down with a young person to do this before, it is an adventure. And it could be interesting, but I highly recommend doing this yourself with the youth that you're working with. Just expecting a youth to do this without you doing it with them or doing it as a model is probably not going to work. So creating your own relationship map and having them do it with you and or as you're doing it is a great way to get started. This can be done by hand, definitely highly recommend it, or with some sort of manipulatives to do it with. And mapping can really be used for them to visualize who they can go to for support, what kind of support they can get from their networks. And it can also help you to see how much youth can trust each other, because when they start to map out their own relationships, especially with the youth in their lives and their peers, it can really help them to see some of these relationships and whether they're actually healthy relationships or not. So I think that's important. And then to show those connections between the folks in their networks, right? How they interact, how often they interact. And here's a really true, I guess, revealing quality of a relationship map. And that is, where is support needed? Where is there more support needed? Where is their web weak? And why is it weak? And what you can do, or what these other players in their relationship maps can really try to jump in and create a stronger thread in that web. So I think moving forward here, again, I'm not really checking the chat. So hopefully if there are questions or comments, we can address those. Okay, so as we're getting close to kind of the wrap up, which is crazy because I could probably do a full day on this and more to talk through some of these things. I just want to take a second. I'm going to maybe pick two of these questions and just have you comment in the chat. Two of these questions. Okay, so I'm just going to pick two. All right. How could strengthening developmental relationships help to reduce some inequities in supports for young people who are marginalized in our society? Think about that for just a second. This is a lot. It's a heavy question, probably more than you can put into a chat response. But as you're thinking about that, what are some ways that these developmental relationships could help us? And keep that in mind, not only from an adult serving a youth, but between and among youth, and also between you and your colleagues. What are some ways some of these developmental relationships could help us reduce some of the inequities in the supports that are offered? Can you think of ways that this framework could be helpful? The web of support concept? You can unmute if you'd rather talk about it, or you can put it in the chat. Thoughts about that? That's a big question, right? That's a big question, but I think it's important to be thinking about that. We're talking about youth of color, our immigrant populations, youth with special needs, strength in numbers. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one. The web of support when it comes to our professional lives, our work with youth, youth working with youth. You know what? I'm good with that. I like that. Strength in numbers is a powerful statement. Another question that I think really stands out to me and kind of encompasses a lot of the other questions on here is, how could questions and issues of public policy be reframed using a web of support framework, right? Thinking about this in terms of public policy. And again, this is kind of rhetorical. We don't necessarily need to answer that question today, but I think it's something to think about, you know, when we go back and work within our schools and our programs. Reframing so many of these things that we discuss on a daily basis in our work, like web of support framework is a really powerful way to look at this. this community concept of how we support our students, all of these different players and these networks and these actors and these anchors, and how students could be better supported if we thought about this in different terms, and how we can all interact and be interconnected to better support our kids and make sure that these webs are strong and that these links and these threads are not weak, right? And jumping in when there's a weak thread to make sure that we aren't losing people. Okay, I'm going to take 1 second here as we end and just do a quick review. Okay, so I am actually pretty blown away by the fact that I got through that. I know I was speed talking for most of it. I think Steph's trying to be kind and say that it's not so bad, but I'm pretty sure I was racing. But I want to just take a second and look at these elements of care. And I'm hoping that you're not seeing that and you're still seeing my slides. Are you still seeing my slides? Okay. All right. So when I read an action or a type of support in the chat, you just put in there whether it is express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, or expand possibilities. This is just kind of a fun way to wrap it up. Okay. So I'm going to read it off, and in the chat, you just tell me which one of those elements it is. All right, so I'm just going to grab a couple here. All right, learn from young people and show it. Learn from young people and show it. Which one of those would that be? Is that an example of? Oh, yes, share power. Good job. All right. Ask hard questions and provide alternate explanations. Ask hard questions. Challenge growth. Yes, there we go. You know what's funny? It could possibly be. There are some tricky ones. There are some tricks in here. Show young people how to ask for help when they need it. Show young people how to ask for help when they need it. Okay. I could see that. I could see that. I could see that. Okay, it is under provide support, but I could see the other two as well. So that one was tricky. All right. Connect young people to other people who share their interests. Connect people to other people who share their interests. Yes, expand possibilities. All right. Let's see. Provide specific and descriptive feedback for students to use toward their improvement. Challenge growth, challenge growth, challenge growth. Believe it or not, that one is under provide support. But I could see that too. Okay, y'all are getting me here. I'm seeing now how these could fall under multiple categories. That's funny. I was like, that one's easy. That's provide support. Model being a curious learner by asking questions. Y'all are good at this. Yeah, challenge growth. It's also under another one, I believe. Curious learner by asking questions. Yes, expand possibilities. Ask students for input on assignments, class content, and show how they can show proficiency. Proficiency. I can say proficiency. Share power. Very good. All right. You know what? You all got this. I don't need to go on, but I could go on for quite some time. It looks like we're at, and I would like to continue, but I will not. I want to just quickly look at this last slide. Stephanie has shared in the chat a link to a folder with multiple resources that I wanted to share with you. One of them is a lesson plan to an activity on a visual representation, sort of an activity that you could do with youth or your colleagues on like a pass the yarn activity where you can actually create this web of support and visually show how the web of support works, as well as some other handouts and so forth that you could utilize in your work with youth. And then I believe that is it. So that is it. There's my contact information. I just want to thank you all for following along with me today and for joining this session. And it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much.